All right, here we are at one more of these incredible raw and uncut interviews with friends and clients of mine who have worked through our mentorship program. Guys that I did not know who came into my world through our program have become incredible friends and even better fathers and husbands. So, this man that you're about to hear from, his name is Clint, and Clint is an incredible athlete, a business owner of a very successful business, and also a football coach and a longtime lover of sports, where him and his family are actually heavily involved in trying to be missionaries and light in the world through the sports that they are a part of. That's a core part of their call. But Clint wants to unpack in this story a little bit about how he wasn't in a place where his marriage was falling apart, and he wasn't in a place where he was spiritually bankrupt. There was nothing that was really wrong with Clint on the outside. He just had this growing concern about how much time was passing and ultimately how he should be using that time. And it's incredible what happened in Clint's life and what he's now doing with his wife Shannon as a result, and all of their kids. I'm so incredibly grateful to have been able to spend time with Clint and continue our friendship as a result of his time together in the mentorship. And so, like it is with all of my clients, they become friends, they become part of a bigger network, a brotherhood of men who are really trying to grow and become the very best kind of father they can, in alignment with the true biblical account for what fatherhood really is. So you're going to hear a little bit about Clint's experience with that today. And I hope this is a huge encouragement and a huge challenge to some of you guys who feel like a lot of things are going pretty well, which is a lot of men. And so this is going to be super insightful and incredibly helpful for you. So without further ado, let's jump into my conversation with Clint. How are you guys?
We're good. Everybody's good at home. We are starting football today, which in Alabama kind of rules the
Yes, it does.
social world. But my sixth grader, Pearson, his football team, I'm head coaching his team, and it's the last time we'll coach them uh, forever because they'll go to middle school next year. And I sent a message to our coaches this morning and I say, hey, I know it's the grind. It's time we are, it's a lot of time that we're putting into it. But basically, if you assume you have 50 practices between preseason and regular season, I said after today we'll have 49. And so let's take advantage of every one that we have, and not get bogged down in the grind and the time of it. So I'm super pumped about it. Got a really good group of guys coaching with us, where she picked up two younger guys that both that played college, and just love making an impact on the younger generation, and have a strong faith element to them, and so they're going to coach with us, and that's super cool. And they get to be the young guys while the rest of the dads are the old guys.
I love it. That's great.
So
Well,
we're
yeah,
clicking.
Alabama
And
football is a big
doing
deal.
college visits for the older daughter and living the dream for the rest of them.
How does that feel? I mean, um, yeah, like one of the things that you had shared with me early on was like how many Sundays you had left
Hmm.
with her, and now you're doing college visits. Tell me what that's doing in your heart.
It's real. I've got a calendar reminder. I look at every Sunday morning. I think when you and I first spoke, I think I had about 80 Sundays left with her. And I think now it's 54. And so, it seems like a good chunk of it is moving by pretty quickly. So, I think it's really, I think it just reminds me that I don't always have more time with them. And it reminds me that the number of opportunities are getting more and more limited to shape our children while they live in our house. It seems like with the two younger ones, it seems like they're going to be with us forever. But I can remember they're currently 11, about to be 12, and I can remember when our oldest was 11, about to be 12. And it seems like it was, yesterday. And so, um, it's real, and I've got a reminder on my calendar every Sunday to remind me of it. And it just reminds me that I don't, have forever to kind of leave my imprint before we send her off with her bags packed, which will be a very fun day. But it's a day that I don't want to look back on with regrets.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the hard part about fatherhood in general. And a lot of stuff that's maybe long term is the negative repercussions are things that we often realize down the road if we do drop the ball or become less intentional or anything like that. And it's because it doesn't happen like immediately. Um it's hard to picture, oh, there's a day where I'm going to go like drop my daughter off at college and my regular weekly rhythms with her are now over it. Hopefully not um long term, but at least
Sure.
in the same way that they once were when she was living under your
Hmm.
roof. So I mean, we started a few minutes ago talking about coaching, and it's one thing I've always respected about you is you seem incredibly disciplined, or at least should I say, maybe from my perspective, you have a capacity, a great capacity for discipline. You're an athlete. You guys are a family that's really heavily focused on sports. And, you started talking about the coaches and, hey, we've got 50 practices, 49 after today, like make every one of them count. What was going on in your head, in your heart, last fall when we first talked about transitioning, because you've been in my community for a long time, and then you were wanting to kind of go deeper in like the cohort mentorship stuff. And so, yeah, what was going on with you there in relation to, okay, I've always been relatively disciplined. We've got a fair bit of order to our life. You're a business owner, business leader. You're well structured, but you were looking at something, I imagine, that said, "Hey, this has got to be shifted a bit." Is that fair to say?
Sure. I think it's just the natural tension of making this shift and realizing along the way that my most important job was not at my office. My most important job, biblically speaking, was in my home. And I think the tension of trying to balance it well, and the tension of, the demands that are coming from the office and the demands that are coming from home and the demands that are coming, in my marriage, and just trying to balance all those and hold them in the right tension, knowing that there are certain seasons where my office might get a little bit more of me than home. And there are certain seasons, like I'm going into now, where I'm going to leave the office a little bit earlier in order to get to go coach my son's football team. And so I think really that you and I kind of had a conversation, and one thing that attracted me to the cohort was the idea that things naturally do not put themselves into order. I think you and I spoke one time about, if if we leave them alone, closets go from order to disorder. Bookshelves go from organized to unorganized. And what I was looking for as I approached this season was a set of systems and guardrails that didn't focus on everything, because I was, you know, really convinced, and I'm still convinced, that if everything's important, then nothing's important.
Yeah.
Um, but I wanted a system of guardrails and a set of systems that focused on the things that were truly essential, and those I was going to double down on. I love the analogy, and I think we spoke about it during the cohort, or somebody brought it up, of you're juggling balls, and some of them are rubber and some of them are crystal. And whatever you do, you can't drop the crystal balls. You can drop the rubber ones and pick them up off the ground later, but really identifying what the crystal balls were, and then kind of doubling down on them in this season of life. Um, because I do want to look back when we send our 17-year-old off to college in about a year, or it's my 15-year-old or my 11-year-old twins. I do want to look back and know that I've, to the best of my God-given ability, through the power of the Spirit, I've loaded their suitcases so that they go to college with their own faith and not just a faith that they inherited from mom and dad that is very fragile. That was really important to me, and that's part of what led me to jump in with both feet into the cohort.
Yeah, that's good, man. Well, it reminds me of a comment that you made, and you had brought this up around the idea of Deuteronomy 6, like when we were all talking about that, and you had said something of the sorts of not feeling like you were as intentional of a father, leader, kind of manager of a household as you would want to be. And you commented about how, you know, metaphorically speaking, we're not in Jerusalem, we're in Babylon. And
Mhm.
so there's obviously implications for your kids and your family and all of that stuff here, but there's bigger implications as well. And these are kingdom oriented things, and it seems like you're seeing the world through a lens that a lot of people probably aren't thinking about the world through. But do you want to maybe unpack that a little bit for
Sure.
me?
So I live in Alabama, and there's literally a church on every corner, and it is culturally not only culturally accepted, but kind of culturally expected that you be in church on Sunday morning. And I think that I feel the risk of feeling far too comfortable, like this is my permanent home. Things are easy, things are good, and everybody's a Christian. Um, at least they are on a church roster and probably attend some sort of a church service at some point throughout the year. And I share a conviction that the reality is that this is not my home, and that this is the analogy of I'm not in Jerusalem, I'm in Babylon, and my citizenship is in heaven, as Paul writes about in Philippians 3. And the idea of not wanting, I mentioned when my kids go off to college, Shannon, my wife, and I sharing this conviction that they arrive to college, or the next phase of their life with kind of their own relationship with Jesus and their own faith, and not just one that they inherited from us because it's a system of habits that we took them to church on Wednesday night and we took them to church on Sunday morning, but they had their own authentic faith in Jesus, that was so strong and so passionate that they never quite felt at home here on this earth. And they always longed for the home that is to come with King Jesus. And so I think it's really easy, in Birmingham, Alabama. The Christian life is never easy. There's nothing about the Christian life that is easy. But it is easy in Birmingham, Alabama to talk the talk, and, culturally fit in with a local church, without really walking the walk. And so I think my conviction, and Shannon, my wife, the conviction we shared was, um, being intentional with our kids so that they realize this wasn't their home, permanently, and to not get overly comfortable with the things of this earth, and to develop their own relationship with Jesus so that when they went off to college, whatever the next phase of their life looks like, that they have a faith that sustains them through the ups and downs that we all know we're going to face.
Yeah, that's so good. Well, so it kind of reminds me, I can't remember the book name. I want to say it's Thousand Miles and a Hundred. I forget the name. It's a Donald Miller book. And he shares this story about a father who feels like he's losing his daughter. She's dating this like crappy guy, and they feel like they've like lost, control, and they're not seeing the ownership in their children of their own spiritual walk. And that, it feels like they reached this point where their kids were old enough that they could start kind of making some of their own decisions, and they were
Mhm.
noticing those decisions were not ones that they liked. And he was talking to a mentor, and his mentor said, he's like, I don't think you've given your children a big enough vision to kind of like something to grab hold of. And he says, the easiest way to lose your kids really is to to not cast a vision, not give them a mission to fight for, and then let them find that somewhere else, typically with peers, because they have
Mhm.
something to belong to, something that they're fighting for, even if it's very arbitrary, like teenagers with whatever it is that they think is important. They'll grab hold of that and they'll run with that, and it'll typically take them in a direction that is not healthy. And so what this guy did was he brought the whole family together and he's like, hey, I committed our family to raise, like, I don't know, $25,000 for this charity or whatever, this mission organization. And they were like, you did what? And he's like, yeah, we're committed. We're going to work together. We're going to raise these funds or whatever. And they were kind of taken aback and they were frustrated at first. But then over the course of the next several weeks, the daughter ended up dumping the boyfriend, helping raise a bunch of money, and like
Mm.
just by giving this vision. And I think one thing that, as a result of our emphasis on mission, vision, and values in reforming fatherhood, I think you did a fantastic job in terms of trying to make some of those shifts as you are seeing yourself, kingdom oriented. We're headed for a different place, right? Like we're headed to eternity with Christ Jesus
Mhm.
in a kingdom, and not on this, earth in the way in which it is today. Tell me more about what you guys did with your family mission, your family compass, what you did with your kids, how you kind of weaved them into that process and experience, and if there's things to write home about that have come about with your kids and conversations, I'd love to hear that too.
Sure. There's a famous former college football coach here in Alabama, and said hindsight is 50-50. And so, looking back on it, what we did, we put my wife and I individually worked through kind of the steps to create a vision and a mission statement and our family pillars. And then we carved out some time on Saturday morning where we prayed through it, talked through it, fleshed it out. Had a date night that following Monday after we had some time to kind of sit on it and pray through it, and then met with our kiddos and rolled it out to them. And I printed it out, both the mission statement and the four family pillars, on cardstock, and then I also gave them little pocket cards, about the size of a credit card, and walked them through kind of process that Shannon and I went through to develop this mission statement. Walked them through the why behind it, and I would love to tell you that they took it and they memorized it, and it became the most important thing they carried in their wallet or their purse or on the back of their phone. Unfortunately, it did not. However, to me, the cards, and they still have them. I think one of them it's in a desk drawer. The other one taped it actually on his nightstand. We found one in the dryer that got left in a pair of shorts. The win, Chris, was not the cards. The win has been the conversations around the cards that still happens. And so I laminated a bunch of copies. I put them on pink cardstock, green cardstock, that colors that really stick out, neon colors. And we talk about them regularly. When we're having conversations about how to handle something, we'll go back to, our family mission statement, or we'll go back to one of the four pillars. We'll talk through it. And then randomly, I'll just take one and pass out a new set just so everybody's got it. If they've lost it, but they don't want to tell me they lost it, they've got it. And so it's really not, the magic is not in the card itself. The magic is in the conversations that the card has created.
Yeah.
And so, it'd be really easy and would have been easy, and the temptation is certainly there when life gets hectic, to say, well, we put in the work, we rolled this out. They didn't, automatically adopt it and jump on it the way that I would have wanted them to, or the way that I did as a 43-year-old father who helped craft the vision. But I also view it as my job as a father to regularly bring them back in.
Yes.
And, for me to assume that a 15-year-old boy is going to think like a grown man, I would be sadly mistaken. And he proves to me several times a day that he doesn't. But it's my job to bring that back in and say, man, we talked about, one of the ways that our family exists to create spaces for people to experience the kingdom of God. One of those is through, discipleship. And so, okay, I know Knox, who's my 15-year-old, what kind of impact are you having on those around you? One of our other is leadership. Okay, Knox, tell me about how football went today. How's the conversation in the locker room? How are you being a leader? We use an analogy we use in our house a lot is a thermostat versus a thermometer. And thermometer just kind of blends in. Thermostat sets the temperature of the room. And, my challenge at work for all of our team leaders and at home, is leaders are thermostats, and leaders help set the culture of the room and help lead the conversation and get it back on track when 15-year-old boys get into the gutter. And so to circle back, it's really not the cards that were the win, because those were easy to print and easy to hand out. It's really been more impactful, the conversations that the cards have created.
Yeah. Yeah. I had a boss, a CEO, years ago, close friend of mine now, who he always said a CEO is actually a CRO. He said the chief reminding officer. And so it's like when you have a mission, you have vision, you have values that you guys want to live by and press towards, your responsibility is to remind people, because they have day-to-day
Mhm.
stuff. They're getting involved in the weeds, they're executing on responsibilities. And so typically mission and vision and values for people who are not the top leader of an organization don't always stay bubbling up at the top, right? Like they tend to get
Mhm.
lost in the minutia and the noise. And our responsibility is to constantly pull people back in, just like remind you of what's valuable, remind you of what's important, where we're going, why we're doing what we're doing, and to expect them to just get it like you do as the senior leader is it's a recipe for frustration. And
Mhm.
to your point, I often tell guys, like, it took almost 40 years for me to learn the things that I know, or to value the things that I value, to assume that my 10-year-old is going to have that.
Mhm.
It's like, you know,
Yeah.
you're setting yourself up for a lot of frustration. So I love that perspective. Now, the CEO kind of mindset and role and responsibility is something that, we spend a lot of time talking about, this
Mhm.
picturing your family as CEO and wife COO kind of working together to operationalize the mission. It's really like make things happen. CEOs and COOs don't work very well together unless they are communicating, talking, planning, strategizing, dealing with problems and those kinds of things. Um, from my recollection, you and Shannon regularly meeting together as part of kind of the rhythms that we install was a pretty fruitful experience for you guys, if I recall correctly. Tell me, what are some of the things that you guys experienced as you started having these kind of regular meeting rhythms that maybe took stuff that you guys were already kind of doing in pieces here and there, and kind of centralizing a plan for how to approach that on a regular basis?
Sure. No, our time is Saturday mornings. That's usually the best time that we have around the house. And so we meet in my office at home. We have an agenda that the cohort helped me to create. And we sit down and we pray together. We work our way, through kind of logistical stuff. Who's taking who to what event, who's picking up, what are the plans for dinner? Is it going to be a grab and go crock pot night? Is it going to be a sit down? What nights we're going to have all the kids at the house? Let's make sure we take advantage of those. And so it starts off, after some prayer, kind of pretty heavy logistics. And, then it kind of transitions to the broader I guess, kind of help of the home, so to speak. And we talked through, how the kids are doing, um, family budget. And then one of my favorite things I took away from the cohort that I think's probably been one of the most impactful things for Shannon has been, each week we keep a running list of things that just aren't working around the house, whether it's a teenager that won't get out of bed on time and mom was having to go up 2, 3, and 4 times. Or it could be something around the house that isn't working. Light needs to be swapped out, something needs to be repaired. We've kind of got a running list of things that the house, if they were to be repaired or corrected, everybody's life would go smoother. And so we put that together, and then Shannon gets to pick one of them. And I make the commitment to help her address it. So, for example, if it's the 15-year-old that won't get out of bed, I might not be there in the morning when she's trying to get him up, but I'm there at night and I can make him go to bed earlier. And I can sit him down and communicate to him that, hey, I know blank time has been your bedtime, but you're obviously having a hard time getting up for mom in the morning. So I'm moving that up 30 minutes. And I think what it has done, instead of letting little things fester, it's given us a conduit to have those conversations regularly. It's given Shannon a conduit to where I'm asking the question, hey, what's not quite working? So she doesn't feel like she's complaining. She's just answering the question. And that has been really fruitful. Sometimes it is a little bit bigger, like, an attitude of one of our children. And sometimes it's really, really small where, hey, a plumber needs to be called and we need to address this. But it has given her a voice to express things that aren't quite working perfectly in her world. It gives me an opportunity to come alongside her and help address them before they fester, and all of a sudden they're big problems. So that has been really helpful. I would say we are on the upper side of consistent, not perfect. We had 2 Saturdays last week where we were both traveling on Saturday morning, going out to the West and then coming back. And so then we try to kind of fit those into, once we get home and get settled, and Sunday night, we're pulling out computers and calendars and we're just kind of talking through the week. Or we'll combine it into a date night. We try not to do that because a date night and a family meeting, have 2 different purposes. We want to more connect on a deeper level on date night and not talk about carpools. But as a fallback, that does work. And I have found that when we don't have them, things just don't run as smoothly now that we've gotten used to the benefit that they add. We don't have them, and all of a sudden we're wondering what we're doing for dinner, who's picking up who. We're talking the night before about the next day instead of having the week planned out. So we found that to be a very fruitful time, for us. And I think it's really been good for the children in our house. The teenagers typically aren't up on Saturday mornings. They tend to sleep pretty late, but the younger ones, and for them to come in and we ask them to go back in the living room because mom and dad are talking, we're meeting and we're planning out the week, and they see us as a team and not mom doing her thing and dad doing his thing and just, kind of high-fiving in the hallway as we pass, in the afternoon. So it's been a really fruitful, addition to our family, and certainly mine and Shannon's marriage.
You'd mentioned the distinction between date night and a family meeting. Obviously, I'm a huge fan of that kind of separation. Do you feel like having a family meeting has changed the dynamics at all of your date nights and allowed more kind of that separation to where date nights are just connection points? Or do you guys feel like you did that really well to begin with, but you were just void of the logistics stuff?
I'd like to tell you we did that well to begin with, but it was probably very heavy on the logistics side. Date night was before the family meeting was a part of our Saturday morning routine. Every date night with 4 children, just ended up being a logistic meeting. And so getting that behind us allows, date night on Wednesday night when all the kids are at youth group. It gives us a chance. We're not talking about carpools. We're not talking about dinners. I had the opportunity to really kind of check in with her. She checks in with me, and we really kind of get to connect on a deeper level because we're not, we've already got carpools and dinners planned out because we did that on Saturday morning. So I think 100% it has improved not only how the week flows, but it has significantly improved date night because we're not talking logistics. We're just connecting on a deeper level.
That's good. I love it. Okay, so a couple more probes here just to kind of hear from you. Imagine, this is last fall when we were first talking about the cohort, and you were considering this journey all over again. Knowing what you know now, the things you've experienced, the stuff you've put in place, and all of that stuff, would there be any difference maybe in the encouragement that you would give yourself in that kind of decision time, knowing what you know now as to why you should jump in to this?
I think what I really took away from the cohort was the idea, and it was mentioned on week one, and I'm so glad it was mentioned because it was such a great, it really set the stage of what we were aiming to do together. And, we live in such a Amazon type world where I want to order something today, I want it on my doorstep tomorrow. We tend to celebrate the big events. We celebrate, things of magnitude, and we really underestimate the process it takes to get there. And the idea that was painted on week one of, hey guys, just let's go ahead and set expectations. The goal is not an 8-week transformation. The goal really is a trajectory shift. And, I was, I found that to be true, sitting here 4 months on the backside of the cohort, that, we tend to chase the glamorous, and we chase, the big milestones, and we chase the big events, and we celebrate those. And those are things that get a lot of clicks on Instagram. But the small, simple practices that can be maintained daily, and the trajectory shift of, okay, I'm going into a different season of life. So fitness might look a little bit different. But before the cohort, I would have flipped the light switch off. Now that I've gone through the cohort, I'm just going to turn the dial down a little bit. And I'm not going to get to zero. And, so I think, the trajectory shift, kind of approach to it, I found to be very beneficial. It's sustainable. And like I said, I've now got twice as much time outside the cohort than we spent in the cohort, and I'm finding that to be true. I think, Chris, one thing that you did, for me, and I'm pretty confident I can speak for the other men in the group because I've heard them express something similar, is, just making me, your approach to scripture, your approach to your faith, your approach to your family called me to be, to kind of raise the bar, so to speak. And it was in a very encouraging way. But the bar was raised, but it wasn't raised so high that I couldn't reach it and I couldn't sustain it. But it was little tweak here, little tweak there, another tweak over here. And over a period of time, I love the analogy that James Clear in his Atomic Habits book talks about the plane that's supposed to go to New York, but shifts, I think, 87 inches to the south from LAX, and it doesn't go to New York, it goes to Washington, D.C. Yeah. And over a period of, 3,000 miles, the destinations, 100 and something miles apart, all because of 87 inches. And so, I think, and the last thing that I would tell myself is, I think I was probably on, on the call, at least in our group, probably on the older spectrum, in terms of age of my children. And, I think it's never too late for a trajectory change. I didn't come into the cohort with a broken marriage. I didn't come into the cohort with overly rebellious children. I didn't come into the cohort with my faith, you know, very shaky. But coming into the cohort with a 17-year-old and a 15-year-old, and knowing I don't have a lot of time left, I probably on the front end underestimated the power of those 80 weeks if I spend them correctly. And so, I love the quote, the best time to plant a tree was 100 years ago. The second best time is right now. And, so do I wish I would have been doing, the family meeting all along? Absolutely. Do I wish I would have taken the time to sit down and, craft a mission statement and our family pillars, when my kids were, 8 and 5 and 2? 100%. But in God's timing, He led us together this past January, and I have experienced the power through the Spirit of just a simple trajectory change and taking a few key items and implementing them on a regular basis has really proven to be fruitful.
That's amazing. I appreciate you sharing that. Means a lot to hear that. Well, thank you for your time and just kind of sharing your experience. It's super meaningful, I think, for guys to get a firsthand look at just kind of what other people are walking through. And I love that you called out that last piece of like, these are not things that are designed for people whose lives are falling apart. Like
Mhm.
this is just a meaningful biblical fatherhood. And most of us did not grow up getting any of this.
Yeah.
And so it's like I had to be taught this. I had to go seek out and find and refine and do all these things. And then it's no different for the guys that I get a chance to serve. Any final thoughts that you would give to somebody who's thinking about looking into one of our groups, an encouragement or a challenge or anything like that?
Um, I think probably just, most of the guys that are interested in the cohort or that are going to come across your stuff, um, and most of the guys out there, most of the dads out there don't have bad intentions. They just get busy.
Yeah.
And there's somebody else that I've heard one time referred to as the stress bubble of life. And, I think if left alone, life drifts along, calendars fill up, evenings disappear, kids grow. And I think the cohort was really helpful for me to identify kind of what matters and to build rhythms around those priorities. And so, I couldn't give, I would certainly give 2 thumbs up to the cohort. The only reason I'm not giving 3 thumbs is I don't have 3 thumbs. But I do think it is the best thing, the best online group I have been a part of, where I really felt connected with other men from Oregon and Arkansas and Florida and Texas. And, I highly, highly recommend it. And I think it is something, if I had um, a new son-in-law, I got a 17-year-old who is far away from getting married. But if they were engaged or if they were newly married, or certainly if I had a grandbaby and they had a small child, I would send them through the Reforming Fatherhood cohort. It was that impactful for me. And so that would be one of my gifts to them. So that's probably what I would say. I would give it 2 thumbs up. Like I said, the only reason I'm not giving 3 is I don't have 3 thumbs.
Awesome. That's amazing. That's super encouraging, and I appreciate the kind words. And yeah, hopefully this is encouraging to some other men who are processing through this and are interested in growing as a father. So thanks again for your time, Clint. It's amazing.
Hi, brother. Really good to connect with you again. Glad to hear the baby girl is doing well. And have the brothers gotten adjusted?
Yes, they're adjusting well. They fight over getting a chance to hold her. So
She is going to be well protected.
well protected.
Yes.
Absolutely. Awesome.
All right, brother. Look, you have a good Monday afternoon. I'll chat with you later.
Alrighty. You too. See ya.
All right. See you, Chris. Bye.
Okay. Well, you heard it from Clint. If this is something that interests you, there's some information down in the show notes. Would love for you to consider joining us in the Reforming Fatherhood mentorship program. And would be happy to jump on a call and answer any questions that you have as a result of your interest. And we will catch you next time. Thanks for watching this.